And that's a needed time of refreshing and to take your time off of it for a little while. Another thing we used to do was go to theme parks because we like theme parks. So we would go and you would just lose yourself in that, even if it's just for a day, even if it's just for 8 hours. And you just lose yourself and get caught up into the theme park or into the fantasy of being there in whatever theme park you like to go to. And then when you come back home, then it's like a mini vacation, a mini break. And you just take those little times and refresh yourself, and then you are a better caregiver.
That's really good. You was taking care of Marcus, and was there a time when you thought that he would get better?
I did. I thought that he would get better, and I would see improvements in him. Even though he didn't speak, I would see improvements in him. One thing that was remarkable and miraculous about Marcus is even though he had such big diagnoses, he was very seldom hospitalized. Even though he had a trach, he only had pneumonia one time in his 19 years of life. He had no bed sores, nothing like that. And I attribute all of that to the excellent care that he got. And I always used to tell people, I said, well, he has a bulldog as a mom as well.
I'm a witness, though. Well, you know what? Even with that, too, you have to be careful, and you want to make sure that your son get the care that he needed.
Yes.
And so you had to make sure that the nurses did what was required, and there was no, I forgot.
No.
When it came to taking care of Marcus, no one had to forget. And I think as a caregiver, the pressure of that, having to remember, having to make sure that the medication is on at the time given, the food is given, and all of that is
yes.
recorded and kept up, and all of, the whole 9 yards.
The whole case management is what I call it. The whole case management of it. And yes, it's a lot to do. But like I said, we do it because we love our loved ones, mm-hmm. and we want them to get the best care there is possible.
You mentioned that Marcus had surgery. Did something happen in his surgery in the process? Because you said he was healthy and then he had surgery and then...
Yes, yes. When Marcus was born, I and everyone thought that he was a healthy baby. And when he was 4 months old, I took him to the pediatrician because he was kind of tugging at his ear. And so being a second-time mom, I knew that was a sign of an ear infection. So I took him in to see the pediatrician. And when he was crying, the other pediatrician who was there having lunch, we were seeing a nurse practitioner that day. So she went and got the doctor and had the doctor help her to listen or look. And so the pediatrician was like, this baby looks blue to me. She said, it's hard to tell. And black baby, she said, but he looks blue. So then she started testing his oxygen saturations and found that he was a bit low. So they put him on oxygen. They took a chest x-ray. And it wasn't really improving. And so we went from the doctor's office to Wusthof. And then the next thing I know, he's being airlifted to Arnold Palmer. And we get over to Arnold Palmer. He has seen a pediatric cardiologist who's done a heart catheterization and telling me and my husband that he has a congenital heart defect. So the story goes from there. He was in Arnold Palmer in Orlando, and he was airlifted again to St. Joseph's over in Tampa, where he underwent a surgery called a Blasik-Tussick shunt, and it's called a BT shunt. And so what they do is they try to enlarge the pulmonary artery because he had pulmonary atresia, which is like a stenosis or a restriction of the pulmonary artery. So they did that, but he also had what is called a VSD or ventricle septal defect, which is like a hole in the heart. So they repaired part of the defect because tetralogy, what he had tetralogy of below is 4 defects. So they repaired one of them, but they didn't repair the hole that was in the heart. And according to the doctors, is that he developed a blood clot, or which is a stroke, and then that went to the brain that left him in a persistent vegetative state for 19 years.
So what was you thinking? What was going on in your mind through all this time?
All that time. At that time, I think it was just a bit much, in shock, unbelief, because just the day before he was fine, and the day in ICU and cardiac ICU and over in Tampa. So you just pick up and you go. And so at that time, it was shock, it was disbelief. And as time went on, then that turned into anger. And then as that time went on, then it's like, okay, this is my son, this is our son, and we've got to take care of him, and we've got to deal with what's going on. And so initially, I didn't want to learn anything about his condition. I didn't want to learn anything about the nursing and what he required. And one nurse over at Arnold Palmer, her name was Susan, I'll never forget her, and she told me, she said, well, I says, well, I don't need to learn how to do all of this stuff. And she says, well, what will happen if a nurse doesn't show up? And I said, well, if a nurse doesn't show up, then they don't ever need to come back. And she says, well, that could be true. She says, but how will you know if the nurses are doing it right? And she used reverse psychology on me. And I was like, you're right. Yes, I better learn how to do what I need to do to take care of Marcus. So I thank her for that, because that taught me if someone came in and did something different, and I would just ask them, so I see you do this way. Why do you like to do it that way instead of this way? So it let them know that I knew a little bit about what was going on, but I didn't know everything about his care at that point, but I knew enough that if something appeared wrong or appeared not like he usually has his care, then to question it.
Mm-hmm. So she basically just equipped you for the journey.
Yes, she did.
That you had to take to make sure that that Marcus received the best care as if he was at Arnold Palmer.
Yes.
And so that's so vital when caregivers are taking care of people in their homes, or whether someone is going out to someone else's home and be a caregiver themselves, to be able to be fully equipped to understand and to not, and to recognize when something is not being done right. And you can say, wait a minute, why did you move this over here instead of leaving it right there? And kind of like letting them know that you're a part of his well-being.
Yes. Yes. And some appreciated that and some did not. But it was what I thought I was called to do for him. And those who did not appreciate my willingness to help.
That's a good way.
Yes, willingness to help, or willingness to make sure that he got what he needed to get. They just found out that might not be the place for them. And caregivers need not be afraid to speak up and say, this is not working for us. And there may come a time when you may have to separate from some of the caregivers who have been there, or caregivers who are new and just started. And that's okay, because it's not that you are looking out for the people that are coming there to help you. You're looking out for your loved one. And unfortunately, everyone that comes to your door or comes to the door of the hospital are not all there for the same purpose in giving the best care. Some are there just to get paid. Mm-hmm. And nothing wrong with getting paid, but your first priority is to be a caregiver, is to provide care.
Mm-hmm. So through everything that you've been through and everything that you endured, and you had to learn and you had to face. What was the one thing that you could remember about your journey as a caregiver to Marcus?
One thing that I could remember. Let's see. There are many things that I can remember. And when he was small enough that we could still carry him into, he had a little red wagon that my husband had gotten for him, one of those little flyers, and it had the little on the sides and stuff. So we would put him in that flyer. I can't think of the name of it, but it's the little red wagon that kids have. And so his vent would be in the front, and we'd have him like on the back there, and he'd be sitting in his little car seat, and we'd take him out like down the street. And sometimes one of his nurses who had been there for a long time, Miss Alice Terra, she would take him down the street in this little red wagon, and she'd bring him back, and they were like, "Well, aren't you afraid when she takes him out there?" I says, "Well, she is a nurse, and she has an ambu bag, and she's not going like 2 streets over. She's just going down to the end of the street, like in the cul-de-sac, and come back." And so he really enjoyed that. He really enjoyed the being outside, the fresh air, because I believe that's important as well. It's having fresh air, good food, having sunlight. And sometimes people don't get those things, but it helps, I believe, in the healing process with having the sunlight, the fresh air, and also the good food and nutrition and the meds.
Well, I've seen a picture of Marcus, and when I look at him, I can see that he just showed love. He showed that he was loved to the very end.
Yes, and he was.
You know,
he was.
And he looked happy. You know, he looked content, and it was like, it just blew me away how loved he looked. His eyes just showed love, that I'm loved. My parents accepted me. They took care of me, and I'm doing good.
Yes. And that's what I always would tell people, that Marcus was ours and we're going to keep him.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, Ms. Marilyn, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your life story. I know it wasn't an easy one to share, but I do believe that those that are listening is encouraged and given hope as well. Before we go, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I would just like to tell those who are either starting this journey in caregiving or those who have been at it for a long time, because my journey in caregiving started with my mom, and I didn't realize that we were talking about it, but it started with my mom 25 years ago. And I can't say that it ended with Marcus, because there'll be other times and other people that I will help in taking care of. But the most important thing is that we have to remember that God has put us here for a purpose. And if that purpose is to help someone or to be blessed to be a caregiver, because it is a blessing, everybody can't do it. And if you can't do it, that's okay too. But you may have the gift to go and get someone who can assist you in taking care of your loved one. But the most important thing that I would want to leave with those who are either starting or those who are in the midst of caregiving is to make sure that you take care of yourself, because caregiving, you can get burnt out, and you can't be an effective caregiver if you yourself are now being the one who needs to be taken care of.
Well, I'm glad we're going to end with that note. And I just want to just let all the caregivers know that Destiny Christian Church will be hosting a Caring for Caregivers event on November the 12th. It is for all the caregivers to come out and receive a day of pampering, massages, the whole 9 yards is for you guys. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. And again, it's at the Destiny Christian Church at 700 South Courtney Parkway in Merritt Island, Florida. So if you're in this area, please take time to come and just have a day of relaxation and get to know other caregivers as well. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Live with Necee. I am your host, Opal Bailey. God bless you.